Hey, we're at FailFest 2014 with another speaker that I've been dying to speak to. And this is Clay Robinson of Sun King. How are you doing, sir?
I'm very well.
Very good, very good. You just got off of the stage with a great speech about, well, embracing failure in business and learning from it, right?
Certainly.
Can you give me, and I got to ask you, in your business, if you fail on a particular type of brew, I really don't see the drawback there because, I mean, if you're going to fail on anything, might as well screw up on a beer so you can drink it, right?
Sure, sure. Well, the nicest thing about beer is that it's a lot like baking. So there's a series of times and temperatures and ingredients. So if you're comfortable with your ingredients and you're good about the process and incredibly clean throughout, the beer may turn out different than you wanted, but it'll still turn out to be a good beer. So the coolest thing, the coolest thing about beer is, like, I don't love every beer that we make because we make styles of beer that aren't my favorite. But the best thing about beer is, while there are a dozen people over here, each one of them probably has a different favorite beer, and I could give it to you and you'd be like, this is fantastic, and she might be, and my mom would go, this is terrible. You know, so depending on who it is, there's a lot of room for interpretation.
Very cool. Again, I don't see any failure happening in beer. I mean, it's always going to be a different taste.
We try not to fail with beer, so
Actually, in your space, innovation comes from, well, that wasn't exactly how I did the last time. Wow, this actually tastes a little different, a little better. So in your aspect, in your business model, just in your industry, the failure can actually lead to some great innovation, some great new tastes.
Yeah, very much so. You know, when you're doing a beer, if it doesn't turn out exactly like you want, we're very meticulous with all our notes and times and temperatures and everything. So when we're tasting those beers and they come out and we talk about them, we'll have conversations like, well, I expected that this flavor would come out. So if or when we brew this beer again, we'll make notes and go, all right, well, we want to increase this element here. We might want to change that temperature or this time and tweak it the next time around, because we have probably 20 or so beers that come out every year. And they're not always ever the same, because with beer, I mean, our house beers are always the same, and we work really hard to make them taste great. So if you had Sunlight Cream Ale this week and you come back to town 2 months later and you have it, you want to remember that it was that beer. But the rest of the beers, there's so much excited. Osiris is my favorite. It's the most selfish endeavor at Sun King. It's the beer my partner Dave and I designed and brewed because it's what we want to drink. And that beer, in its first year and almost a half before we started canning it, went through probably 20 subtle changes, because we knew once we put it in a can that we would want to keep it the same, because people want to have those flavors. So we took that time to have those conversations and figure out, like, no, we need to tone this hop down, bring this one up, add an addition here and do this and that. So
what a great industry. I'm sorry.
And you get to drink beer while doing it. I should have brought you a beer.
Yes, you should have, and we're going to talk about that later. All right.
Failure.
Another one. All right, let's talk about real failure, because obviously you have your recipes are changing, and unique recipes are things that you miss, open opportunities. Let's talk about business, and let's talk about failures that allowed you to springboard into Sun King. Sun King is a fantastic local brand, but it's not local anymore. It's moving. You're going a lot of different places regionally, right?
Actually, our goal from the beginning was to sell as much beer as close to home as humanly possible. So our long-term goal, even with the new Fishers facility as a production facility in the long run, is about making and selling beer in Indiana. Because Indiana gets the most boon from the sales tax and the excise tax. And we want to be a destination that people look at. We want to help make Indiana a destination. We now have 96 breweries in Indiana. Sun King was the 32nd, so there are 3 times more breweries in Indiana than there were 5 years ago.
That's why I love it living in Indiana.
And we do events out of state with other breweries or festivals that we do, where we'll do one-off distributions. And when we do those, we do that so people can enjoy our beer around an event, and they come and they say, hey, this is great, where can I get it? Well, here's a list of a dozen places. And they're like, but it'll only be here for a while, where can I get more? Well, you have to come to Indiana to get more. So we're trying this kind of approach of, hey, we're a tourist attraction. So, you know, the water park at the Fishers Brewery will be a great attraction for the kids. Drop your kids at the water park, come drink beer.
Exactly.
There's not really a water park, so
doesn't really matter. Just say that. We'll get more
Fantastic.
people. So, how long has the brand Sun King been in existence?
So I left my last job as a professional brewer about 6 years ago. We just celebrated our 5-year anniversary. So, you know, a lot of what I was talking about, and I think it actually goes back to the question you just asked about failures, and then I spun it to a water park.
It's all right. I dig it.
But so in between 2 professional brewing jobs, I had about a 3-year period of time, and it was kind of the subject of my talk up there, and addressing failure and why it's important. So I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life, and actually until I helped found Sun King, I really don't think that I had a solid grasp of where I wanted to go or what I wanted to do. And at the end of the day, I needed to create a job where I could be me, and do it and love. So I'd written a bunch of business plans in between times, and when I would write the business plan, I'd always take them to my father or to one of his business associates or a friend's dad, and I would run over the business plan, and they'd read it, and I'd sit there pensively like, oh, what's he going to say?
Right.
And then it was great because so often in this world, people are like, oh, no, that's a really good job. That's really nice. Love what you're doing there.
Ain't that
but
cute?
instead, they're like, pick it apart.
Right,
and it was crushing. Like, it was soul crushing to sit there and have worked for months on this business plan in your off time working on these things and have somebody come in and say, well, where do you get this assumption and how do you justify that growth and why are you doing this? And I don't understand anything about that and this isn't ever going to work. Just getting beat up left and right. So I wrote 6 business plans before I wrote the Sun King business plan, and none of them ever made it into anyone's hands other than advisors because I'd worked through and put in a lot of blue sky and like, oh, hey, because you think about it, and as the son of a salesman, you want to sell stuff, and you want to like, here's my idea, and I want to get you hyped about the idea. I want you to be excited about it. And as an investor or a business person, what do they get excited about? They get excited about growth and monetizing their investment. So, by having my soul crushed over and over again on these other business plans, when I wrote the Sun King business plan, it was bare bones, brass tacks. This is what we need to do to survive, and this is solid incremental growth that we can do year after year that is justifiable.
Conservative growth.
Conservative growth. We've grown by leaps and bounds. I think our first full year, over our first half year, we grew 830%, and then the following year we grew 100%, and then the following year we grew 80%, and then 50%, and then 40%. But as you keep growing by those numbers, this year we're up 35% over last year, but 35% takes us from 21 to 28,000 barrels. So
there you go.
Yeah.
Wow, that's fantastic. But you mentioned something very, very important. Is that you were personally tied to this. It was a lot of times, whenever you're an entrepreneur, your business model, it's a personal attachment. It's your image.
It's a passion project too. So
absolutely, and that's something that I've been hearing as a thread through this entire meeting is that you need to be passionate, but at the same time, you can't label yourself as a failure if something fails.
Exactly.
And in this respect, you went through the gamut on just even trying to have those business models reviewed and scrutinized, and by that very definition, you were able to actually come to a honing of your business.
Yeah. Very
Fantastic.
much, and that's I talked a little bit about it up there, but we don't have a culture that accepts failure. We raise kids now, and I don't have any kids, so I can't say too much about it that's credible. But but from what I see, you have kids, and kids are taught that they need to succeed, and you've got to work hard, and you've got to get straight A's. And I got C's when I was in high school and college both, and a C is actually average. So it didn't mean that I was a bad student. It just means that I only kind of grasped it.
You were uninterested.
And so and there were certain things that I was uninterested in. And so when with kids, I've seen people with their kids be disappointed that they got second place. And it's like, no, second place is still winning, and losing is actually still a win, because if you can lose and assess it and deal with that loss. So you got kids who never lose in their lives, and then they get into their 20s and 30s, and the economy's shit. And can I say that? This is a podcast.
Absolutely, you're good.
And you can't find a job, and
go off reservation now.
Yeah, you can't find a job, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, and then you feel like you're failing for the first time in your life, and it's the biggest deal in the world. When I've effed stuff up left and right, so and I learned from it.
You're absolutely spot on. Is that we want to make sure that this generation and the generations that are coming are not protected by failure, because it's such a learning environment.
I think it's something to embrace.
You have to, and a lot of investors will not even take on a business if there's been no failure, because one, they don't want to be the one that's going to be there during that failure. But at the same time, you don't have seasoning. You don't have the life lessons that business needs to thrive.
It is losing that makes winning that much sweeter.
Absolutely.
Boom.
I love it. That was the
soundbite
there. All right. Hey, any last thoughts for an entrepreneur who's starting their brand new business, or is contemplating it and wanting to get in but doesn't know where to go?
I think in starting any business or do anything, obviously passion is an incredibly important part. but doing your due diligence. And if it's, you know, it's hard to start a brewery if you've never made beer before. So I always reference, and I don't even know what Malcolm Gladwell book it is, but there's this 10,000 hour theory, where in order to really be an expert at anything that you do, you need to put in 10,000 hours. You need to work hard for a long period of time. So while people are like, oh, Sun King is an overnight success and it's amazing what you've done in 5 years and how did you possibly do it? Well, my partner Dave and I both brewed professionally for a decade before we opened Sun King. So we'd been preaching the craft beer gospel and talking to people and offering beers to folks and getting feedback and honing recipe skills and talking about what we wanted to do for 10 years. So there's an old country song, it's like overnight sensation after 20 years of dedication. And so I think you have to put in the time as the backstory to really be in a place. And it's interesting because, I mean, with tech and other things, you don't have to put in as much time, and you can be a kid who's been tech savvy for his entire life. But doing something you're passionate about as an entrepreneur is incredibly important because the hours are long and the pay sucks and sometimes it's non-existent and you've got to do 80 and 100-hour weeks sometimes, and people wonder, how do you keep going? But it's not even like work when you love it. So if Dave and I talk about this a lot, but we have a genuine belief that if you're passionate about something and you're doing something that is a genuine endeavor, you believe in it and you want it to succeed, even if you have failures along the way, you'll inevitably succeed because you're on the right path.
Absolutely. So stay passionate, right?
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, man.
Thank you.